Dreams of the Forest. Alice had always been drawn to the ancient forest that bordered her grandmother's cottage. Unlike the other children in the village, who preferred to stay within the safety of their gardens, she found solace among the towering oaks and whispering pines. Her grandmother, a wise woman known throughout the village for her knowledge of herbs and folk remedies, had taught her which mushrooms were safe to gather for their hearty soups and stews. On one crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the breeze, Alice ventured deeper into the forest than ever before. The morning mist still clung to the forest floor, creating ethereal shapes that seemed to beckon her forward. Her wicker basket was already half full with ordinary honey fungus when she spotted something extraordinary, a cluster of mushrooms unlike any she had ever seen before. These strange fungi seemed to pulse with an inner light, their caps shimmering with colors that shouldn't exist in nature, deep purples that faded into electric blue, edges trimmed with what looked like liquid gold. They grew in a perfect circle, just as her grandmother had described in her tales of fairy rings. Alice knew she shouldn't, but something about these mushrooms called to her, singing a silent song that seemed to resonate with her very soul. Before she could stop herself, she had plucked the smallest one and taken a tiny bite. The taste was indescribable. Like starlight and morning dew, like the sound of wind chimes and the feeling of warm summer rain. For a moment, nothing happened, and Alice almost convinced herself that they were just ordinary mushrooms with an unusual appearance. Then the forest began to change. The transformation was subtle at first. Colors became more vibrant, sounds more musical. The rustling of leaves turned into whispered conversations, and the patterns of bark on the trees began to shift and flow like living art. Alice watched in wonder as the forest revealed its true nature to her. Tiny creatures emerged from behind trees and under leaves, beings that couldn't possibly exist in the ordinary world. Some looked like miniature dragons, no larger than squirrels, with scales that changed color to match their surroundings. Others appeared to be living balls of light with delicate, translucent wings. They regarded her with curiosity but no fear, as if they had been waiting for someone like her to finally see them. As Alice walked deeper into this transformed woodland, she began to understand the secret language of the forest. The old oak trees spoke of centuries past, their memories flowing like slow sap through ancient rings. The mushrooms shared gossip through their underground networks, passing messages from one end of the forest to the other. Even the stones had stories to tell, though their tales were so slow and deep that Alice could only catch fragments of their meaning. But it wasn't all wonder and delight. In the shadows between the trees, she caught glimpses of darker things. Not evil precisely, but wild and unpredictable. Shapes that seemed to be made of living shadow, creatures with too many eyes or not enough, beings that existed in spaces between spaces. These sights might have frightened her in the ordinary world, but here they felt like natural parts of a greater whole. As she wandered through this enchanted realm, Alice came upon a clearing where a group of fairy-like creatures were holding court. They were beautiful and terrible to behold, with wings like stained glass and eyes that held galaxies. The smallest among them, a creature no taller than Alice's hand, approached her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Child of the daylight world," it spoke, its voice like crystal wind chimes. "You have tasted the dreamer's cap without invitation. Few mortals have done so and returned unchanged." Alice felt a flutter of fear in her chest. "Will I be trapped here forever?" she asked, thinking of her grandmother waiting at home. The fairy smiled, a gesture that somehow conveyed both warmth and warning. "No, little one, The mushroom's magic will fade with the setting sun, but you have been marked by it nonetheless. The veil between your world and ours will always be thinner for you now. You will see glimpses of our realm in the corners of your eyes, hear our songs in the whisper of wind through leaves. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Alice asked. That depends entirely on you, the fairy replied. Knowledge is never good or bad on its own. It's what we choose to do with it that matters. Will you use this gift wisely? Will you remember that not all beautiful things are safe and not all dangerous things are evil? Alice thought carefully before answering. I promise to be wise, she said solemnly, and I promise not to eat any more magical mushrooms without permission. This answer seemed to please the fairy, who plucked a single golden hair from its head and wove it into a ring around Alice's finger. A token of our meeting, it explained. When you see it glitter, you'll know there's magic nearby. Use this knowledge well. As the sun began to set, the enchanted forest slowly returned to its ordinary appearance. The fantastic creatures retreated to their hidden realms. The trees ceased their conversations, and the colors faded to their natural hues. But nothing was quite the same as before. Alice could still see faint glimmers of magic if she looked from the corner of her eye. When she finally returned home, her grandmother was waiting at the door with a knowing look. You've been walking in the fairy rings, haven't you? She asked, not unkindly. I was wondering when they would call to you. You knew about them? Alice asked, surprised. Her grandmother smiled and held up her own hand, where a ring very similar to Alice's glinted in the evening light. There have always been those who can see beyond the veil, she said. It runs in our family. Come inside. It's time I taught you about the real magic of the forest. From that day forward, Alice's life was different. She learned from her grandmother the proper ways to interact with the hidden world, the offerings to leave, the words to speak, the signs to watch for. She never again ate the mysterious mushrooms, understanding now that there were safer ways to glimpse the magical realm. Sometimes, on special nights when the moon was full and the air was thick with possibility, Alice would sit by her window and watch the shadows dance in the forest. The golden ring on her finger would glitter, and she would smile, knowing that while some dreams might be dangerous, the real magic was in knowing when to look, when to act, and when to simply appreciate the wonder of it all.